What's up, you data-hungry Amazon sellers? This is your host, Tommy Berenger of the Sell, Rank, Win podcast for Merchant Words. And in this podcast, we give you the answers to your most burning questions, actionable insights that you can take away and implement into your business today. So let's go ahead and dive right into today's episode. What do you say? Let's go. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Sell, Rank, Win podcast for Merchant Words. I'm your host, Tommy Berenger, and my next guest is a straight up Amazon PPC wizard. You would know what I'm talking about if you follow his case study post on LinkedIn. He just grew a brand on Amazon from $0 per month to roughly now over $800,000 per month from just 2 products. And this was all done within 1 year. Amazing. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to my good friend, Daniel Tejada of Straight Up Growth. Daniel, how are you, my brother?
Doing well. How are you doing today, Tommy?
I'm fantastic, man. I'm fantastic. I'm glad that you are on with us today. How's everything in your neck of the woods out there in San Diego?
Oh, can't complain. It's weather's been pretty awesome. You know, got all the it's conference season here, so finally doing some in-person conferences, which feels new, which is funny. So it'll be fun to do that again.
Very cool. I mean, we had you on the 3rd episode of the Sell, Rank, Win podcast, and now you were on number 40. And yeah, that was way back in the end of 2020. So I had some other people contacting me to get on the podcast, and I was doing my due diligence on them. I just wasn't really feeling them. So I was like, you know what, let me hit up Daniel and see if he can get back on the podcast. And you were like, let's do it. So happy you're on. Just want to appreciate your time, man. Thank you.
Pumped to be here today.
Absolutely. So for those that have not listened to episode 3 or do not know who you are and who Straight Up Growth is, if you can just tell us a bit about you and your company.
Yeah, awesome. So I've been doing Amazon and pretty much hyper-focused on advertising since about 2016. Came from a company called Quiver. It's kind of where I got my feet wet. I was able to spend $7 million in a year when our CPCs were like 10, 20 cents a click. So that was a huge budget back then, which was fun. Nowadays, I've spent over $50 million in Amazon ads. I've done a little bit over $500 million worth of sales on the channel, through my management. Now we've got an agency called Straight Up Growth. Last year we managed about $35 million in spend. We did a little over $350 million in sales on the platform. And we're very, very growth focused. So excited to be on the podcast here today.
Awesome. Yeah, I see your goal there is 700 million, right? I think
for this year. So
for this year,
come on down, baby.
Come on down. Let's do it. Right. Well, that's awesome. I mean, from knowing you over the past years, and then from also always following you on LinkedIn, I know you are a true Amazon growth wizard. That is no doubt. So my first question is, what type of ad strategies do you recommend for someone who is just getting started? What campaigns should they start with? What do you recommend there?
Yeah, great question. So I think even before you're thinking about your campaigns, one of the things you have to nail down is, your strategy against your goals, right? Against your budget. One of the big mistakes I think brands make is when they, especially when they're first starting off, they're not, well informed or really they haven't really quite figured out what it's actually going to take them too much there, right? So not everyone has a massive budget, right? Not everyone can operate on a super aggressive strategy from a PPC perspective, for example. If that's the case, right, you want to try and focus your research, because every campaign is going to start the same way, right? We are essentially making our guesstimates. We're going to do some keyword research on search terms that we think have a chance to convert, right? But we're also typically taking terms like that. So let's say I was launching, a protein bar, right? You're going to do your keyword research using something like, Merchant Words, give you some great search terms, a lot of good, what I call seed keywords. Seed keywords are essentially the term that you're putting in, let's say, as a broad match type. So like protein bar would be a seed keyword. and it's going to return a bunch of different variations of protein bar, right? Some are going to be winners, some are going to be losers there. So all campaigns start, at kind of that same level there. However, depending on your goals as a business, if I'm trying to grow profitably, right, and let's say I'm in a little bit more of a more competitive category, one of the things I'm going to do is cheat towards longer tail search terms right off the bat, right? So I know if I've got $2,000 a month to spend and I'm in the protein bar category, I'm not going to go after protein bar, right? Because at that point, CPCs are probably going to be way too high compared to the budget that I have, and so I need to find other places to do my customer acquisition. So it might be using a keyword research tool, expanding on a keyword like protein bar. Maybe the first 100 search terms there don't make sense because they're going to be too competitive. But maybe I'm going to go after kind of that middle ground, right? Everything that's got search volume of 10,000 searches a month or something like that, or below, or something like that. And so there are ways that I would kind of cheat with exact matches towards those within campaigns. But I'd say really the most important thing someone needs to do is understand what they actually have from a budgeting perspective. What are their goals? Do they want to grow quickly or do they want to grow profitably, right? That should all impact how you actually start, your efforts themselves. I'm gonna pause there. Does that, kind of make sense to you?
No, absolutely. So in a follow-up question there is how far out do you spider out off of the seed keyword? How many long tails would you go
Great
after
question.
into one campaign? 20 long tails, 25 long tails. What is it?
Great question. So what I like to do is actually just do some math, right? So one of the tricky things, if you're net new and you've got no CPC, no starting cost per click bids, and you don't really know where to put yourself to start, I know that I like to start at like assuming search terms cost $4 or $5 a click, right? If I'm in a more competitive category, if it's less competitive, it could be cheaper. But with Amazon's massive ad inflation last year, you have to assume that more expensive terms cost about that much when you're starting because you have no relevancy. So essentially, if I have a $2,000 budget, I like to hit 30 to 50 clicks on a search term to have statistical significance on how that term is going to perform for us. So basically, I would take $1,000. Let's just assume we're doing a $5 CPC, right? I can literally just run the math, see how many clicks I can hit per month, and then that gives me a rough idea of how many search terms I should start with, right? So 20 to 25, for example, is not a bad number there. One of the pieces we're going to do when we set up a campaign in the first place is we're going to set up our structure with what we call our research match types. We'd set up like an auto, a broad match, against some of those seed keywords that we mentioned. And then we'll also start with what we call a performance campaign, really just hyper focusing on like exact match. Typically what I'm doing is any converting search terms from research campaigns, as soon as I hit a conversion, they'll automatically migrate over into an exact match type, right? That's really where I want to focus my spend over time is exact match. The other thing we'll do on our end is cheat on certain search terms that we think, might make sense. So we'll probably add some exact matches on maybe like 10 to 20 terms, as well as adding them as a broad match type. The broad match is going to give me different variations of that search term to see if there's, at a more granular level, there's certain search terms that perform better than others. And then the exact match type, the reason we're cheating with that right off the bat is to try to force Amazon to give us impressions. Yep. One of the hardest things to do when you first launch on Amazon is get ad impressions themselves because of how impactful your relevancy to a search term is against getting an actual ad impression. Now, what is relevancy to a search term? It's really how your product at a child ASIN level performs against a specific search term there. So what that means essentially is
so looking at like a metric like CTR?
To an extent, yeah. So it's basically like Amazon is literally looking at how many clicks does a product have against a search term, how many sales does a product have against a search term, what's that product's conversion rate against that search term. So when you start net new, right, one of the things you'll find is it's very hard to spend your first month. The reason for that is that Amazon doesn't have any clicks or sales history for your product against most of the search terms that you're going after. There. Over time, as Amazon sees clicks on your product against a term, sales against your product against a term, your conversion rate's decent, they'll actually give you a higher relevancy score, and it starts to make it easier to spend against that search term itself. There. But for net new products, it's a disadvantage. If you're already existing and you already have some relevancy, that's where relevancy becomes your advantage, right? It's a moat. You're going to spend less from a cost per click basis as someone who ranks well against a search term already compared to someone that's net new. And I think that's a big thing that most people don't think about from a PPC perspective. Like net new, you are always paying the highest cost per click bids and you're getting the worst ad impressions. And it's not because Amazon's trying to throttle you against a search term. It's that another product has more relevancy than you do, and they want to favor getting ad placements to those other products, right?
And their sales history is better as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, what we're talking about today is how even being net new, we can still turn ourselves into that market leader, right? But build our own relevancy using PPC, essentially.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And you alluded to building a moat. That is very important. And yeah, guys, just keep listening back to this podcast. So many value bonds were just dropped right there if you didn't know. And then you mentioned earlier, you want to see, looking at a keyword, you want it to get to roughly 30, 35 clicks, excuse me. And now, how do you know when a keyword is not performing well after the 30 to 35 clicks? Are you looking at if there's no sales? Are you going to pause it right away, dramatically lower the bid? What is the strategy at that point?
Great question. So when I'm at 30 to 35 gets me like decent amount. 50 clicks gets me like statistical significance, right? Like if I have 50 clicks, the number of orders I'm going to have against that search term, it's pretty likely that if I went to 100 clicks, the conversion rates would stay the same.
If you didn't get a sale after 10 to 15 clicks, would you pause it?
Not usually. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll start to slow it down, right? So I might not pause the search term. I might start to decrease the bids. But part of that depends on how many converting search terms I already have. So one thing I like to pull, like even when I do an audit for someone who, let's say, is already spending, one of the first things I pull is what is the number of non-branded converting search terms already within the campaign, right? So if you're net new here, one of the biggest things you're trying to do is just expand upon the number of search terms that you do convert on, right? So you have more targets to essentially go after. But when you're net new, let's say you've got 5 or 10 converting search terms, you want to test out your search terms a little bit more fully, just so that you can identify, more potential converting non-branded search terms, right? Those are basically going to be like your targets. But the biggest thing you need to do when you first start is try to get as many targets as possible, right? The more variance that you have within your search terms, the more likely it is that you can succeed if, let's say, one of your search terms gets super competitive all of a sudden. Like this happened with one of our brands recently. CPCs went from $5 a click to $18 a click within 30 days, right? So that really hurt us against that search term. However, one of the things that did kind of help save us and kind of push the account back in the right direction here is that we did have some other search terms that were converting within the campaigns. We weren't concentrating as much ad spend towards them, but with the spike in the CPC against our highest volume term, we pivoted, right? And we're actually now going after a term that's much higher volume. My CPC is at a $4 instead of $18 there. And so now I can drive more ad spend towards that and other search terms, right? That's why it's important to be diversified and not just be concentrated on, one or two terms there. Now, once I hit, let's say I'm hitting, I have I have a couple terms that are, converting really well. And now I'm hitting, 35 clicks on terms and I'm seeing like 1 or 2 orders, right? So my conversion rates are too low. Those ones I'm not going to full blown pause, but what I'm going to be doing is one, making sure they're moving to the exact match type so I can directly control how much spend I allocate there. But then I'm going to start bidding them down, right? When you bid down, you're going to get less ad impressions, you're going to get less clicks. but overall you should be able to see, much higher conversions against that.
Yep. And you also
What's it called?
just spoke about something
Yeah, in general.
earlier
So we'll see.
is you want to have an array of keywords, a lot of keywords to go after. I mean, I I fell victim to a product that I sold that only had like one or two or three ways to describe the product for the buyer. The the good old anglized ruler. You remember that
Oh
one?
yeah, tough, dangerous.
Yes. So, I mean, it was so funny. I mean, I was killing it. I was number one. But then, I just didn't really, there was no margin there because I was spending all this money on these few keywords, as you can imagine. And
Yep.
that was it. And I was like, that was a mistake that I learned. And I always preach that, you need as many roads as you can to lead back to your product. And the keywords are those roads. The more keywords, the better, just like you were saying. Now, what are some of the metrics you look at to find out when it's time to double down on a campaign to kind of go full throttle there? I know that depends on a few variables, but
Yeah, I'll give you
in general,
give you a couple different things that we're looking at. So there's kind of there's a lot of strategies, but let's just break down like our focuses for our campaigns to kind of like three purposes. One for us is ranking, right? We love to use our ads to actually help us with improving organic results. There, for those efforts, the KPIs that I'm looking at, or like the main one is conversion rate. There, right? People kind of speak through the relationship of like ads and organic ranking, and there's absolutely a major impact there. But it's not just spending to spend, right? Amazon's not just looking at how much spend did you have against a search term and deciding you should rank there, but they're actually looking at how many people are actually converting against, or like what's your conversion rate against those search terms that you're spending ad dollars against. So if I'm going for ranking, I'm looking at conversion rate as a KPI and deciding to double down based on that, plus what's the search volume, plus what's my organic ranking. Am I showing up in Brand Analytics? That will kind of tell me if I should be more aggressive on allocating more dollars to a ranking campaign purpose. Then second goal, let's say, would be like return on ad spend focused, right? So if I have an ACoS target or a tacos target or something like that, then I'm going to double down on campaigns based on ones that have ROAS targets or ACoS targets that are below or kind of above. Let's say they're above my ROAS target or below my ACoS target. Those campaigns, I'm going to double down by trying to spend more. So if I'm selling a protein bar, I've got vegan protein bar starts to convert really well for me. My ACoS target is 40%. Let's say I'm at a 30% ACoS. That means I'm going to double down on that search term, right? By increasing my CPC, make myself eligible for more ad impressions, more clicks, hopefully more sales there. So I'd say that's bucket number two for doubling down, is literally just looking at, is this above or below my ACoS target? If it's below, I'm going to increase my bids, start to spend more, start to double down against that. Then the third goal I'd say would be more cross-promotion focused. So one thing that we are seeing, especially massively last year, is big inflation in our cost per click bids themselves, right? As a result of that, it just makes acquiring a customer on Amazon more expensive. And so we've tried to implement some like cross promotion strategies to try to squeeze more dollars out of kind of existing customers. So branded, there are sometimes to double down on some of those efforts or cross promotion there. Those are obviously usually ROAS focused segments because it is branded. So it should be higher converting in general. You already are spending aggressively to acquire that customer. The cross promotion or the branded spend should not be something that you're losing money on. It should be a way of squeezing more dollars out of your existing customers there. So I think those are three buckets that are pretty simple at high level. I know that they're more complicated than that, but generally that's kind of the idea.
True Amazon growth wizard there. That's the knowledge that we love to have on the podcast. Now, my next question, you may have alluded to some of them earlier in the episode, but what were some of the main secret tactics that you used to grow that brand from $0 per month to now over $800,000 per month within just a year.
Yeah.
What did you see? What was like some of the main driving factors for that?
Great question. Great question. So, definitely a competitive market that we're going into here. Both products are, in the keto space or keto health space. Definitely not like one of my products. I was going after a seller that had 30,000 reviews there and was actually the top priced item in its category. But because it had so many reviews, conversion rates are crazy. They've got so many repeat orders. That item is not just that item was essentially the best seller in the category. My number 2 competitor there had about 15,000 reviews. And then I started with 0, right? So super duper fun there. Mm-hmm. So looking at that category as a whole, right, one of the things that we looked at right off the bat, and this is where I say that market research is important, is the competitiveness. So going into this product category, we knew that there was going to be some times where our company was in the red, right? There. Yeah. No way we're going to be able to launch net new 0 reviews
in the keto space.
In the keto space, and my branded volume is pretty low, right? So not necessarily the easiest situation, but what really is worked for this one for a high growth model is that they had the dollars to support running in the red for a little bit. We built like a 12-month forecast out for them so that they understood, okay, look, you're not making any money until this date. However, after this date, this is when your product starts to actually make dollars because of the gains in organic revenue. We really focus on organic driven revenue using ads, right? And this is kind of like a best case scenario launch strategy, I'll say. So what did we do? We launched our product. We did something we called a low launch price strategy, where we will actually start with our product below MSRP. There, typically, the reason you're doing that is so that people will convert against your listing, even though you don't have the reviews to support it, right? When I'm going after a category where my number 1 competitor is 30,000, 4.5-star reviews, and it has the bestseller badge, it's very, very difficult to launch this without any outside traffic or branded volume to at least Buoy Bee. This brand didn't have that, so we're forced to execute essentially a low launch price. So with that in mind, that allowed me to get the conversion rate I needed to start getting aggressive from a PPC perspective. Really what we focused on was we identified what all the high volume non-branded search terms our competitors ranked against, and then we started to try to focus against those terms. So create our campaigns. One of the things you'll see when you first start a net new item, it's very difficult to spend, between $1,000 and $2,000 your first month, even against that product. The reason for that is that because you don't have any relevancy to search terms, Amazon makes it very hard for you to get ad impressions, right? So we had to be aggressive with our CPCs. I'll say our first 3 months, all of a sudden, we're seeing some growth. Really, what we're seeing though that's huge was increases in reviews, right? So when we launched November 2020, I had 0 reviews, but by the time we hit January, for example, right, I'm at 449 reviews there. Now, is that 30,000? No, but I'm almost at 500 reviews within my first 60 days.
That's great. That is fantastic.
Exactly, right? And it's we didn't do any of the against T's and C's from a review gen perspective, nothing like that. All we did was start to maximize our non-branded visibility using the PPC itself, right?
Man, 60 days, you guys got 450 reviews, you said? That's crazy. That's awesome.
Not bad. So that was
not bad at all.
That was helpful.
Did you use the review program, the Vine? Did you guys use Vine at all?
We used Vine there. I used we had a small email list, probably got me 50 reviews from there, just sending my my product out to some previous buyers for the company for .com. So I think that helped kind of seed it. But honestly, what we find is non-branded customers on Amazon leave reviews at a much higher rate than our branded customers do. I don't know what it is, but for whatever reason, it's when we can start to rank, we start to see massive increases. On our non-branded terms, we see our review rate increase pretty significantly. Just wait till you hear our final number of reviews.
Do you have a hypothesis as to why that is?
I think the branded customers already feel like they're bought into the brand, so they're kind of past the point that they want to leave a review. But non-branded customers, they're trying it for the first time, right? A lot of what I described we do is we help people find what they're looking for, right? Someone's searching for, ketone beater or urine strip or something like that. They know that what goal they want to accomplish, but they don't have a brand that they want to use to get them there, right? And so that's where we can definitely come and kick in, like on identifying what those terms are, and for whatever reason, they just leave reviews at a much, much higher rate. Now, what I will say that I forgot to mention here is building a listing that's conducive to being a brand and not just a commodity is also really key. So, like, we really concentrate on listing optimization early on, just to make sure that when you are spending dollars, the people that are buying it are understanding that they're buying not just a one-time purchase from you, but they're buying into a brand, right? That's definitely a major component. That tends to help with gaining better reviews than brands who are selling, a listing that looks much more like a commodity there.
Awesome. That is a very specific strategy for, like you said, net new brands, and it definitely worked for you guys. I mean, $0 per month to now over 800,000. When were you guys profitable?
It took us for this one. Month 6 was the first month, and one of the items is like way lower margins than the other. So I was actually way more profitable on the other item early on. But the item that's a low AOV that I was going after, the big kahuna, 30,000 reviews, that one took me probably about 6 months there. What you'll find is, like, for that item, I think about month 5 is when I started to slowly walk up my price, right? So we launched with that low launch price strategy.
Yep.
I basically increased my price over the next 2 months by about almost 25%. So I did that over a couple weeks here. But what happened along the way is, like, I started to solidify my rankings, right? So it showed up in Brand Analytics, 1 week, then 2 weeks out of the month, then 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden I'm showing up for the monthly view, right? On some of the search terms that I needed. Now I have had some, I would say at about maybe the 8th, 9th month, that's when the 2 top sellers in the category woke up, right? I was taking market share, but not enough for them to feel it until probably like month 8. And then they tried to get super aggressive back. Right now, at that point, I was already building so much relevancy that I basically squeezed the CPCs aggressively. So, like, while our CPCs were going down pretty much our whole time, month 8, we saw a big inflation in cost per click bids. That's because my competition made a run at me. And so I, just wanting to make sure that all the past work worked out, I got aggressive with my PPC for month 8 and 9. And then the other sellers just started to give up there. All of a sudden, I see my CPCs go down like crazy. My amount of ad spend as a percentage for the brand went from, or like the really competitive product, went from 60% spend to revenue. And then, like the last 2 months, for example, which are 2 best months we've had, my spend to rev has been like less than 20% here. The big reason for that is I've got so much organic visibility, right? One of my items, like, I did $100,000 in organic sales last month. Right?
Wow.
There. The other item I did about $75,000 in organic revenue this month here. Actually, no, I did more than that. But a big piece of that just comes down to, once you win, it's a lot easier to play defense than offense, right? So, like, one of my items now has 13,000 reviews. The other one has 5,000 reviews, right? Now I compete. I'm actually the highest price point item in my category for both of those products now, even though we started with that low launch price strategy, and I'm still seeing growth month over month, because now I have the reviews I need. I've got the organic visibility I need there. It was a mean launch there, and that one is one that was, the client wanted to be more aggressive. But now I can basically coast, the rest of the year, here. Like I'll have people come and take little strides and attacks, but
Yeah.
those are just like little short-term spikes in ranking strategies that I'll need to do.
I like what you said there. It's easier to play defense than offense. So, I mean, what do you do? What is one of the main things you do defensively when your ears are up, your ears are perked up, and they're trying to drain your moat?
Great question here. So the first thing, like I like to watch my brain analytics terms on a weekly basis, right? There on a monthly view, it's much more accurate, and you do get a much better sense of what's going on for your business. However, one of the things that I'll say is that when you're looking at the weekly view, you can start to see, okay, like I was a market leader on, term A, I was capturing 35% of conversion share. All of a sudden, why did I drop down to 20% this week? Who's moving into my space? Then maybe I'll do some manual searches, take a look at what the PPC landscape looks like, take a look at my organic rankings, and I can start to see, okay, this brand is getting really aggressive from a PPC front. What does that mean? One of two things. One, I'm no longer getting ad impressions because my bids aren't high enough. So I may not be getting ad impressions because my bids aren't high enough. My competitors coming in there. So then what I'll do is I'll increase my bids, make it harder for them to spend. The secondary thing that I would do would be maybe I'm getting impressions, but the amount of impressions per day I'm getting or clicks per day isn't enough to maintain my rankings. This other person's getting more aggressive. That means it's not a bid increase, but it's a budget increase against those search terms. So defense is really just making it, you want to make it hard for other people to get there, right? And especially like category like we just described, I made it really, it was really expensive and really hard for me to get the market share that I got. But with that in mind, I know that the market leaders have been posting most of the time, right? So as soon
they're
as
getting complacent,
yes, they get complacent, and then they try to get aggressive. But at this point, they've never spent that much on those CPCs they're going after. They've never they've never had to spend as much of a percentage of spend spend to total revenue as they do to beat me, right? So that's why I always say it's like much easier to play offense. Now, brands that are market leaders, they shouldn't lose, right? If they are losing, it's because they're sleeping or they're not being aggressive enough from a PPC perspective.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, like I was saying, they're trying to drain your moat and they're getting complacent. And then complacency, I think, in any aspect in life, business, your regular personal daily life, if you're complacent, I mean, in one word, it kind of kills you, right? I mean, you're staying steady, not doing anything new. You're nothing new and exciting. Or if you're just sitting there thinking you're making a lot of money on Amazon and forgetting about that, there's these competitors coming in with the Amazon growth wizard, Daniel Tejada, then, you're gonna see the downfall there. But yeah, no, great strategies, Dan. Thank you so much for sharing all these fantastic tactics with us. So as we like to keep these podcasts short, sweet, and informative. And before we go, if you can give our listeners at least one tip or trick that they can take away after listening to this podcast, immediately implement it into their lives or into their business. What do you got for us?
Great question. One of the simplest things, in my opinion, sellers can do is work on their advertising efficiency. So that would be essentially what I call wasted ad spend or non-converting spend within your campaigns. 90% of your wasted spend typically, and I do these audits all the time, is from your research match types. It's your auto, your broad, your phrase match. The simplest thing you can do to make your advertising more efficiently, today is literally make sure you're harvesting converting search terms. You're actually moving them into exact match or ASIN targeting campaign, because that's going to be the most granular you are with optimizations, right? We go in, we'll audit these accounts. A lot of times they have 30 to 60% wasted or non-converting spend. I'd say on average, typically 90% of that wasted spend is in the research campaigns. Like when I break out my exact match slide, typically that's like 10% wasted or non-converting. The reason for that is you're choosing each individual search term or ASIN at that level. And so it's going to allow you to be the most granular with some of your optimizations there. So yeah, I would definitely say make sure you go into your campaigns, you harvest, you move terms out of research, you negate them, in your research campaigns, and really let exact match and ASIN targeting spend. That'll get your wasted ad spend down very quickly, and it means you can do more with the dollars that you have.
Absolutely. Fantastic advice. Now, Daniel, where can people find you? How can they contact you? And feel free to drop your social handles as well.
Yeah, no problem. So, you can reach us at straightupgrowth.com, or as you mentioned, LinkedIn is kind of my favorite platform there. I post some case studies, some info, and some personal stuff. So you can find me at Daniel Tejada at LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. Thanks for that info, Daniel. And I just got to say, sorry to Jeff Bezos. We were not able to get you on this podcast this time, maybe on the next episode. So hang tight, buddy. We will get you on soon. Well, Daniel, thank you again so much. I know you are an insanely busy guy. So thank you again for hopping on the podcast with us here and spending your time and dropping some knowledge bombs there.
Absolutely. Love chatting Amazon, nerding out. Hit me anytime for some chats.
Absolutely, Daniel. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you guys so much for listening. And if you got any value out of this podcast at all, please let us know at the place that you listen to it at, whether it be iTunes, Stitcher, whatever it is. Give us some love, give us an awesome review, and let us know maybe some things you want us to talk about on the next podcast. Until next time, guys, stay awesome and be awesome.